When the United States entered World War I, it arrived as a rising power, wealthy, confident, and impatient. Britain, exhausted yet still dominant, had no intention of sharing control. What followed was not unity, but a struggle for authority within the alliance. By spring 1917, Europe had been at war for nearly 3 years. Millions were dead, empires bleeding, and Britain stood at the center of the Allied effort. London controlled the seas, finance, supply routes, and strategy. Not due to strength, but endurance. France provided manpower, Britain provided command. America entered a hierarchy forged by sacrifice. From Washington's perspective, entry marked a moral turning point. President Wilson framed the war as a crusade to make the world safe for democracy, casting America as a global arbiter. Britain saw the war as an imperial emergency. Survival first, control second. This difference shaped early tension. Britain's army was depleted, its economy strained, its navy enforcing a blockade. British commanders believed their sacrifices entitled them to authority. America was late and inexperienced. Yet the U.S. was the industrial and financial backbone of the Allies. American banks, factories, and shipping sustained the war. By 1917, Britain relied on American support, creating leverage and unease. The conflict became personal with General John J. Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Forces. He insisted American troops fight independently under U.S. command, not as replacements for British or French units. To Britain, this was reckless. Pershing argued dispersal would erase national identity, undermine morale, and subordinate America. Equality, he insisted, was structural. British commanders, including Douglas Haig, saw this as naive arrogance. They had endured years of slaughter and understood modern warfare in ways Americans had not. Many doubted U.S. readiness. Doctrine became another battleground. British and French leaders wanted immediate deployment. Pershing insisted on training, mobility, and offensive action over static trenches. The result was strained coexistence. Britain publicly welcomed America, but privately sought to manage and limit influence. Advisors shaped logistics, intelligence fed planning. Politically, inequality persisted. Britain dominated councils and enforced decisions through naval power. Wilson's moral vision clashed with imperial priorities. Britain also felt threatened. American entry shifted global power. Financial dependence on the U.S. eroded British supremacy, and the arrival of a massive American army accelerated the shift. Britain needed U.S. help to win, but feared its implications for post-war influence. Pershing refused to yield, allowing temporary concessions, but keeping American forces intact. By the time U.S. troops arrived in large numbers, the alliance was defined by imbalance. Britain commanded a war it could no longer afford. America funded a war it did not yet control. Both needed each other. Neither fully trusted the other. The paradox of America's entry was clear. It did not join as a subordinate, but could not immediately act as an equal. Unity masked a deeper contest over leadership and the post-war world. Beneath every operation and diplomatic exchange lay the unresolved question, who was really in charge? By early 1918, the image of seamless Allied unity was cracking. Britain, France, and the United States fought the same enemy, but from sharply different positions of power, experience, and expectation. As American forces expanded in Europe, the war became more than a military struggle. It became a negotiation over authority, conducted under existential pressure. The German Spring Offensive of March 1918 exposed these tensions brutally. Freed from the Eastern Front, Germany launched a massive assault aimed at breaking Allied lines before American manpower could fully deploy. British and French forces reeled, communications collapsed, and defeat suddenly seemed possible. In this crisis, British and French commanders demanded immediate integration of American troops into their lines. For them, it was a matter of survival. For General Pershing, it was the very danger he had feared. American forces consumed without strategic control. Pershing chose a reluctant compromise. He temporarily placed American units under Allied command, but insisted this was an emergency measure, not a surrender of principle. The decision satisfied no one fully. Britain welcomed the manpower, but resented the conditions. French leaders, including General Ferdinand Foch, newly appointed Supreme Allied Commander, viewed American insistence on autonomy as an obstacle to unity. Pershing believed he had already conceded too much. The creation of Foch's command appeared to mark a shift toward equality, but imbalance remained. British influence still dominated Allied councils through logistics, naval power, and administrative experience. American officers often found decisions largely settled before their input mattered. In a war of immediate survival, experience outweighed future potential. Cultural friction deepened mistrust. British officers often viewed Americans as informal and undisciplined. Americans saw British command as rigid and condescending. Differences in language and doctrine reflected deeper divides. Americans emphasized movement and objectives, while British strategy centered on endurance and holding ground. These were not trivial distinctions. They shaped who believed they should lead. Despite resistance, Pershing maintained his core objective, an independent American army. This vision bore fruit later in 1918 with operations like Saint-Mihiel, where American forces fought under their own command. Though imperfect, these victories were symbolically powerful. America was no longer merely reinforcing old empires. It was becoming a major military power in its own right. British reactions were conflicted. Public praise masked private anxiety. Each American success hinted at a post-war world where British primacy would fade. Financial reality reinforced this fear. By 1918, Britain depended heavily on American loans and supplies. London, once the world's financial center, now borrowed from New York. American troops made this reversal impossible to ignore. For American policymakers, this dependence created a sense of entitlement. If the United States financed and increasingly fought the war, why should it defer politically? Wilson balanced this pressure carefully, publicly emphasizing unity while privately expressing frustration with British dominance. As American numbers and confidence grew through 1918, the balance slowly shifted. British commanders could no longer dismiss American forces as inexperienced. The tone improved, but the tension endured. What began as a dispute over command had become a larger question about the post-war order. Britain fought to preserve its empire. America fought to define a new role. The alliance held long enough to win the war, but its hierarchy was eroding. Power was being renegotiated in real time, under fire, with consequences that would shape the world beyond the armistice. When the guns fell silent on November 11, 1918, Germany was defeated. But the deeper question remained unresolved. Had the United States fought the war as Britain's equal, or had it merely emerged as one? The answer became clearer not on the battlefield, but at the negotiating tables that followed. At the Paris Peace Conference, the final stage of Anglo-American tension came into full view. Britain arrived as a victorious but exhausted empire, determined to preserve its global position. The United States arrived as a creditor, an emerging military power, and a moral reformer convinced the old world order had failed. War had forced cooperation. Peace demanded definition, and definition required power. British leaders, especially Prime Minister David Lloyd George, understood the danger. Britain was militarily drained and financially dependent on American loans, yet it could not afford to abandon imperial interests built over centuries. The result was careful diplomacy, public support for Wilson's ideals, private resistance to their consequences. Wilson believed America's late but decisive intervention entitled it to shape the peace. His 14 points were not symbolic, they were a claim to leadership. Open diplomacy, self-determination, and collective security directly challenged Britain's imperial system, which relied on controlled trade routes, colonial authority, and strategic secrecy. In peace, the wartime balance reversed. Britain's battlefield experience mattered less than America's economic leverage. British leaders could not ignore the financial power that had sustained their war effort. For the first time, Britain negotiated from a position of relative weakness with a former junior partner. This shift unsettled the British establishment. The war had ended not through endurance alone, but because America arrived with overwhelming resources, implying that future wars would not be decided without American leadership. Yet, equality did not arrive cleanly. British diplomats skillfully limited American influence where possible. They supported the League of Nations, but shaped it to protect imperial interests. They resisted applying self-determination to colonies and relied on the limits of American domestic politics to blunt Wilson's agenda. America discovered that moral authority meant little without imperial infrastructure. Britain still controlled shipping lanes, colonial administrations, and intelligence networks. Power had not disappeared, it had adapted. This reflected the unresolved legacy of wartime cooperation. Britain had never fully accepted American equality during the war. America had delayed challenging British dominance until victory was secure. Peace became a continuation of wartime tension by other means. Militarily, Britain retained disproportionate influence after the war. American forces demobilized quickly under domestic pressure, while Britain maintained global deployments, preserving the appearance of military primacy. But this masked a deeper reality. Economically, the center of gravity had shifted permanently. Britain emerged heavily indebted. The United States emerged as the world's largest creditor. Global order would now be shaped more by finance than by fleets. Psychologically, the war transformed America. Independent command, resistance to subordination, and successful American-led operations set a precedent. The United States would never again enter a major war as a subordinate force. World War I taught America how power is resisted, negotiated, and claimed. For Britain, the lesson was harsher. Imperial endurance no longer guaranteed leadership. Dependence on American resources was not temporary. It was structural. Britain could still lead, but only through partnership, not dominance. This realization shaped British strategy in the interwar years and beyond. When World War II arrived, Britain again fought first, and America again arrived later. But the balance of power was no longer in doubt. The tension of 1917 to 1918 had been a rehearsal. America's entry into World War I was not a moment of unity, but of transition. The United States did not join as Britain's equal, but it refused to remain unequal. Britain did not surrender leadership, but it could not prevent its erosion. The alliance succeeded through compromise, not reconciliation. Britain accepted American independence on the battlefield. America tolerated British dominance long enough to win the war. The armistice ended the fighting. The imbalance it revealed did not. It simply changed form.